A wants to catch this butterfly. So A was looking around, looking for some tools that A can use to catch this butterfly. But A thinks that, well, A looks around, notices that there isn't anything that A can use as a tool. So is that going to deter A? Is that going to make A give up? Well, not today. A is going to say, well, it would have been better if I had something that I can use as a tool, but it is what it is. I can catch it. With might not have enough space for that. Where is it? I'll be right back. Okay, so I can catch it with. Sorry, what am I doing here? Bare hands, my bare hands. 2. Okay, so let's say it like this. So A is saying, yeah, it would have been nice if I had some tools that I can use to catch the butterfly, but if not, it is what it is. I can catch it with bare hands too. Okay, so first of all, of course, A is talking about I, and of course, A is talking about it, the butterfly. And then we're going to take the verb catch and give it the can ending, and we have with something. What is with something? Yes, supplementary information. Okay, and because to, in other words as well, in other words also, is not an independent component, it is not a standalone, it always has to be attached to some kind of a word that it modifies. Therefore, I'm not going to look at it as its own component. Yes, it's going to be a part of supplementary information. With bare hands, too. Okay, and of course the plural does not hold any kind of significance when it comes to its meaning within this type of a context, so we're going to take it out. Okay, so we have supplementary information and we have verb. So of course we're going to start with supplementary information. Okay, so let's first talk about how you would use with in English. How would you use the preposition with in English? There are in large 2 reasons or 2 ways you would use with in English, right? Number 1, you can use with as a way of indicating company. That something or someone is together with someone else or something else. For example, I came with a friend. I sleep with my cat. On the other hand, you can also, you can use the preposition with in order to indicate means, some kind of a tool, skill set, prowess, or method that you use to do something. Okay, so in Korean, depending on what you want to do with, are you trying to use it to indicate company or are you using it to indicate means? Okay, depending on what you want to do with, yeah, it's going to look completely different. So in this case, yeah, of course, I'm using with as a way of indicating means. This time, I don't have a tool that will enable me to catch the butterfly, so I'm just going to use my bare hands as the tool, as the means. Okay, so how would you use with as a way of indicating means? Well, in that case, you have to take a look into the pronunciation of the word that with modifies. In this case, bare hands. So, bare hands, 맨손. So, 손 alone is hand, right? However, yes, if you attach men, now it's bare hands, 맨손. Okay, so the word with is modifying, in this case, is bare hand. Okay, so whenever you are using with to indicate means, take a look into the pronunciation of the word that it modifies. if it ends with a consonant minus one exception, the L or R consonant, then attach 으로. And 으로 will play the role of with. If it ends with a vowel plus one exception, the L or R consonant, then attach 로. So, in this case, it ends with a consonant, the N consonant. It's a consonant and it's not the L or R consonant. Therefore, we're going to attach 으로 behind it, and 으로 will functionally play the role of with, when with is indicating means. Okay, so we have 맨손으로, with bare hands. Okay, and once again, to is not an independent component. It is not a standalone. Therefore, it has to be attached to the word that it modifies. So, we can attach it behind with. Okay, so we are attaching two particles to the word bare hands. So in this case, the question could be, well, how do I know the order between the two? Well, keep in mind, nothing comes behind 도. Okay, so 으로 first and then 도. So now what do we have? We have with bare hands as well. In other words, to. Okay, 맨손으로도. 맨손으로도. Okay, so now we have supplementary information. 맨손, bare hands. Bare hands, but it's going to be interpreted as bare hands. 으로, with, but only when with is indicating means, not company. 도. Yes, and of course, it's not the only way of saying to. However, other versions can be either usually poetic or always poetic. Okay, so 맨손으로도. And then, what is the display form of the verb catch? 잡다. Okay, but of course I do not want its display form. I don't want the ta ending that indicates display form. I want the can ending, which belongs to inflection route number 2, right? So let's go to inflection route number 2. Okay, so we have the B situation, right? We have a display form that ends with B once ta is removed. In this case, yes, it requires us to divide the situation once again into verbs and adjectives. So we have a verb that has a display form that ends with the B consonant once ta is removed. To be a little bit more specific, 잡다. Okay, for the most part, if you have a display form of a verb that ends with B once ta is removed within inflection route number 2, because we're using an ending that belongs to inflection route number 2, the can ending, you will apply a 3-step formula. Remove ta, place u as the irregular middle section, and then you can attach the ending. Okay, there are exceptions, there are variables, right? However, catch is not one of them. Okay, so you have to be aware of all the variables, all the exceptions. Okay, so catch is not one of them, so I'm going to apply the 3-step formula. Remove ta, and then place u as the irregular middle section, and then 드디어, finally, we can attach the el 수 있어요 ending, the can ending. So now what do we have? It is no longer just catch, now it's have to catch. I'm sorry, can catch. Okay. 잡을 수 있어요. 잡을 수 있어요. 잡을 수 있어요. Okay, can catch. Okay, so now let's place it in the 문장. Okay, so now we have the full 문장. Let's try saying it. 천천히. 맨손으로도 잡을 수 있어요. 맨손으로도 잡을 수 있어요. 맨손으로도 잡을 수 있어요. Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 넘어갈까요? Okay, let's move on. Thank you for the flowers. Okay, so B's 문장 will be 짧아요, will be short. So B is going to say, just leave it alone. Why do you have to catch it? Just leave it alone. Just let it be. Let it be a part of nature. Just leave it alone. Okay, so we did use this verb when we had the bees and the beehive, right? Okay, so we're going to use a verb that can play the role of leave one alone. In other words, let one be. Okay, and we have the adverb just. So of course, we're going to place the adverb just first and then the verb later. Okay, so just. 그냥. 그냥. And then let's place the display form of the verb leave one alone, let one be. Okay, 내버려 두다. 내버려 두다. Okay, so if you want to say leave it alone, let one be, as a way of saying don't bother it or don't bother that person, you can use this verb, 내버려 두다. But of course, I don't want its display form. I don't want the 다 ending. I want its actual form in present tense. And of course, we're talking about the butterfly. Okay, so actual form, present tense, it means that I want to give it the yo ending. So let's go to inflection route number 1. Okay, so because we're using an ending that belongs to inflection route number 1, let's apply the rules of inflection route number 1. What are the rules? The rules are, if you have a display form that ends with the U vowel, once ta is removed, U vowel, we have a perfect example. You apply a 3-step formula, right? Remove ta, step number 1, add an extra vowel and form a double vowel that no longer sounds like oo, but now sounds like wa. Very similar to when you say walk in English, of course without the K sound at the end. And then 드디어, finally, you can attach the new ending. Okay, so now what do we have? We have 내버려 둬요. 내버려 둬요. 내버려 둬요. Okay, which is the actual form, present tense of leave one alone, which is leave one alone. Okay, so now let's place it in the 문장. Okay, so leave someone or something alone. Of course, in this case, according to the 문맥, the context, yeah, we're talking about it, the butterfly. Okay, so let's check something. Okay, so all together we have the full 문장. 그냥 내버려 둬요. 그냥 내버려 둬요. 그냥 내버려 둬요. Okay, just leave it alone. Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 넘어갈까요? Okay, let's move on. It's going to be A's 차례 again. A's 차례, A's turn. User 330, thank you. Okay, so once again, A's 차례, A's 문장. So, A is going to say, I want to raise it at home. Okay, we did talk about this in the past, right? So, the verb raise might seem like it's not fitting the context in English. However, in Korean, when you're talking about a pet, you always use the verb raise. Okay, and when you're using the verb raise, do not try to interpret it or use it literally. It does not mean that the pet has to be a baby and you are raising it into an adult. No, you don't have to use it, and you will not use it in most cases literally. You just use it as a way of saying have. So when people say, I have 3 cats, or when people say, oh, do you have a dog? They say, I raise 3 cats. Or, do you raise a dog? Once again, because it is not used literally in that type of a context, it does not mean that the cat and the dog are babies and they are being raised into adults. The age does not matter. Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 계속할까요? Okay, so yeah. Of course, A is talking about I. Of course, I want it. Okay, and of course, the butterfly. So I'm going to take the verb raise and I'm going to give it the want to ending, and we have location at home. Okay, so of course we have to take care of the location first and then verb last. Now we did talk about this a couple of lives ago, right? When you have a location and a verb in a sentence and you have in, on, at in front of the location word, you have to figure out which version you will use in Korean. It can be 에서 or it can be 에, right? So how do you know when to use which? Once again, when you have prepositions such as in, on, at in front of a location word. In English, for example, sleep in the room, dance on the stage, meet at the restaurant. Okay, so in that case, you have to choose one of these two in Korean. So how do you know which one you should use? Yes, the arbiter is always the verb. In this case, raise. Always keep in mind and ask yourself the question, is the verb how I will get to the location? Once again, is the verb the means that enables something to get to the location? So, now, am I going to, the subject I, am I going to go home by raising the butterfly? Am I going to go home by raising the butterfly? Is the verb raising how I will go home, travel home? Exactly. Even the butterfly as well, even if you change the perspective, the focus to the butterfly, to the butterfly's perspective, it's the same. The butterfly will not get to my house by being raised. So it's going to first get to my house and then start being raised. So I'm not going to go home by raising the butterfly. I'm going to go home by walking. So the verb walk is what will enable me to get to the location. So when the verb is how I get to the location, then use 에. If not, then 에서. So in this case, yeah, the verb that I'm using is not how I will get home. I will get home by walking, not raising, or maybe driving, not raising. So it's not how I will get to the location. Therefore, I'm going to use 에서. Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 넘어갈까요? Okay, let's look into another example. What if I say, well, I hate to use the same example, but sleep in the living room. Oops, I'll just say living room. Stands for living room, no space. Okay, so, or what if I want to say, I sleep in the living room these days? Okay, in this case, yes, once again, we have in, on, at in front of a location. So therefore, I have to pick and choose which one I will use. Once again, the verb sleep. Is sleep how I will get to the living room or not? Is the verb sleeping how I will get to the living room? In other words, will I get to the living room by sleeping? Is it a yes or no? Exactly, no. I'm going to get to the living room by walking. And once I get to the living room, then I'll start sleeping. Okay, so because it is not how I will get to the location, I should use 에서. Okay, that's perfect. So in this case, yeah, also the verb is not how I or the butterfly will get home. Okay, so let's place 집, home, and then attach 에서, not 에. 집에서. 집에서. Okay, and then, yes, don't try to use it literally, but when you're talking about a pet, you will use the verb raise, 키우다. 키우다. But of course, I don't want its display form. I want the want to ending. And the want to ending is a no route ending, right? It means that we don't have to go to inflection route number 1. We don't have to go to inflection route number 2 either. Because it's easy to use. Well, just remove 다, and then you can immediately attach the want to ending. That's the beauty of no route endings. You don't have to do anything irregular in the middle. Irregular and complicated. 고 싶어요. The want to ending as a no route ending. Okay, so 키우고 싶어요. 키우고 싶어요. 키우고 싶어요. Want to raise. Okay. Okay, so A, yes, is really determined to catch this butterfly today. A is going to say 집에서 키우고 싶어요. 집에서 키우고 싶어요. 집에서 키우고 싶어요. Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 넘어갈까요? Okay, let's move on. Now it's going to be B's 차례. B's turn. Okay, now at this point, well, first of all, A and B live together. Let's say they're roommates. Okay, so at this point, B is going to be a little bit frustrated now. B is going to say, how do you raise a butterfly? Okay, so do keep in mind, don't just focus on what words are being used on the surface level. Always pay attention to the speaker, what kind of a nuance the speaker is trying to convey. Okay, so yes, technically it seems like a question. It's not actually a question, right? Because B is saying this as a way of saying, hey, don't be ridiculous. How do you think you'll raise a butterfly? How would you raise a butterfly? You know nothing about butterflies. You've never even had a pet. You're rarely at home. So who's going to look after the butterfly? What are you going to feed it? Yeah, you know nothing. You're not ready. You're not equipped to raise a butterfly. So as a way of saying that, yes, B is going to say, how do you raise a butterfly? How would you raise a butterfly when you know nothing about butterflies and you're not equipped either? Okay, so placing do, yes, although it's not actually a question, technically it is structured to be a question. So I'm going to say placing do in front of a question sentence that already has a verb as an auxiliary verb is not something that you would do in Korean. So I'm going to take it away. And of course, I'm talking to you. You want the butterfly. Okay. And no articles, no us and does. Okay, so now we have the adverb how, we have the verb raise, and we have the object butterfly. Okay, so now, of course, butterfly, object, adverb, verb. Okay, so let's first place butterfly, 나비. Okay, and we know that B is a little bit frustrated, right? B thinks that A is being ridiculous, therefore B is frustrated. Now, why would I be placing emphasis on frustrated? Yes, because it could be a very good reason for me to use an object particle, right? So I'm going to give the object an object particle, not just because it is an object, but because I want the object to carry the nuance of frustration. That's what an object or subject particle can do, right? For reason number 2. Okay, so I'm going to give the object an object particle. And by doing so, yes, I'm going to imbue the nuance of frustration into this word and by extension the full sentence. So it doesn't mean anything. Do not try to translate it because it's not a word to be translated. Understand its function because it's a grammatical device. Okay, so 나비를. Exactly. So B is saying, don't be ridiculous, please. Okay, and then, yeah, when you're using the adverb how, you have to know which version you would use because there are 3 adverbs in Korean that can, well, 3 words, 3 words that can be translated into how, right? 어떻게, 얼마나, or 어때요. Okay, so in this case, which one would you use? Because they are all different functionally speaking, you have to know which one to use, when to use which. In this case, which one would you use as how? Exactly, yes, we're going to use number 1. Yeah, in order to meticulously understand the difference between the 3, I always attach a keyword to each of them, right? 어때요 is when you're talking about condition of some kind of a noun. For example, if my friend hurt his back 3 weeks ago, and I'm going to say, how is your back? Now I'm talking about the condition of my friend's back, which is a noun. 얼마나 is when you're talking about degree, in other words, extent. When I want to say, oh, I know it's far, exactly how far? What is the degree, extent of the exact distance? How far? Okay, but that's not what we're trying to do, right? Number one is used when you're talking about enabling. So B is saying, hey, you don't know anything about butterflies. You're not equipped to have butterflies at home either. So you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the equipment. So what will enable you to raise a butterfly? Tell me. So B, in this case, should use number one. Okay, so 나비를 어떻게 아린, thank you. Okay, and then, yes, raise. Once again, raise. Do not try to take it literally. Oops, yeah. 키우다. Okay, I don't want its display form. I want its actual form in present tense, which means that I want to use the yo ending instead of the ta ending. So let's go to inflection route number one. Okay, so we are in the same inflecting situation as when we had 내버려두다, leave one alone, because we have a display form that ends with the u vowel once ta is removed. In 키우다, raise. So in this case, yeah, once again, we will apply the three-step formula. Remove ta, and then place all and form a double vowel that no longer sounds like u, but now sounds like wa. 키워. And then now you can attach the ending. So 이제, now 이제 we have 키워요, 키워요, which is no longer the display form of raise. Now it's the actual form of raise in present tense. Okay, so now because it's an actual form with an actual ending, with an actual grammatical function or attribute, we can actually place it in the 문장. Okay. Okay, and I always say, when you're asking a question in Korean, yes, place a question mark at the end when writing and of course texting as well, and raise your tone at the very last syllable when speaking. However, that is when it is actually a question. In this case, yes, on the surface level, the sentence was structured to be a question. However, it's not actually a question if you look into what the speaker has in mind. B is not actually asking, hey, can you tell me your plans on how you will raise the butterfly? I'm excited as well. That's not what B is saying. B is saying this in order to say, don't be ridiculous. You cannot raise a butterfly at home. So it's not actually a question. The underlying message and tone and nuance is not actually a question. Therefore, in that case, you don't have to raise your tone at the end. Okay, so I'm just going to say 나비를 어떻게 키워요? I'm sorry. 나비를 어떻게 키워요? 나비를 어떻게 키워요? 나비를 어떻게 키워요? Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 넘어갈까요? Okay. So, let's take a look into the full 대화 and see how it flows if there is no pause in between. Yep, and I forgot to add to here. Okay, so first, 천천히 읽을게요. I will read slowly. I just gave the future tense ending to the verb read, but I gave future tense ending version number 2. Okay, 천천히 읽을게요. 맨손으로도 잡을 수 있어요. 그냥 내버려 둬요. 집에서 키우고 싶어요. 나비를 어떻게 키워요? Okay, with a little bit of more 속도. 맨손으로도 잡을 수 있어요. 그냥 내버려 둬요. 집에서 키우고 싶어요. 나비를 어떻게 키워요? With extra 속도. 맨손으로도 잡을 수 있어요. 그냥 내버려 둬요. 집에서 키우고 싶어요. 나비를 어떻게 키워요?